What's up, guys? It's your Uncle Rel. The past few days, I've been trying to figure out ways to inspire by using content, and so I decided to write something, and I'll read it to you today. And it's called, Our People Are Dying, and No One is Protecting Us. If you have ever heard the stories of our elders, then you would know why we persist. The stories of our mothers, aunts, and grandmothers, and the mothers of the church. On occasion, an elder would speak, and the children would gather around to listen. She would tell you about Jim Crow South and growing up in it, about her father and the vegetables he grew for the white folks who owned the land. She would tell you about her first job as a housemaid for a white family and how hard she worked to keep that job. She would tell you about the day the white man tried to rape her and how he threatened her life when she didn't oblige, how she circled the table until he caught her, and how hard he squeezed when he grabbed her arm. She would tell you about the sound his skull made when she hit it with the heaviest object in reach, and laugh in describing the fear and joy she felt in fighting back. She'd pump her arms to show how fast she ran through the field while he lay crying on the floor. She would tell you about her youth and how black people would hang from trees for looking white folks in the eye. And she would cross herself while reminiscing how a black body jerks on a string. You would begin to imagine how liberating it would be to hit a white man in Jim Crow South, and how fast you would run for fear of what would happen if you ever got caught. Can you imagine fearing for your life for simply looking someone in the eye, and them having the power to kill you for doing it? Can you imagine the evil inside of a man who could eat dinner with his family the same night he hung a nigger for looking at him wrongly? Or the soul of a man who could rape a woman because she is property? Can you imagine the only way for you to exist is to be owned and having to pray that your owner never chooses to exercise his ownership? This is the reality our elders would describe. You would learn when black folks could only eat at certain places, and about the look she got when she walked through the wrong door. How at 80 plus years old she could still see their hateful eyes staring through her, and hear the obscenities white men, women, and children scream from their table while eating dinner. She'd tell you about standing in the back of buses, even when there were open seats up front. No matter how long her day was or how bad her feet hurt, she stood for fear of sitting down. Can you imagine seeing open seats on a bus and being afraid to sit, and it being illegal for you to do so? Can you imagine someone calling the police if you sat next to them, and living in a reality where the act of sitting next to someone is an act that needs to be policed? While the elder spoke, your thoughts would drift inward, and you would place yourself in that moment. And you would imagine seeing someone being beaten in front of you for sitting in an empty seat. And you would feel how it feels to stand and watch and be scared and do nothing about it, regardless of how hard they hit the woman who chose to sit. A tingle would develop in your stomach, comparable to feeling sick, and you would hear something or someone scream angrily across your mind. This stimuli would then sink more deeply. You would imagine what you would do if that woman was your black mother, and if you had to watch an officer beat her with a heavy stick. At the thought of this, tears will come to your eyes, but you will force them back because that's what black children are raised to do. You would then imagine multiple officers joining in to beat her with multiple sticks, and looking into their eyes and seeing pleasure. Can you imagine multiple officers finding pleasure in beating your screaming mother with heavy sticks, and not understanding what she did to make them beat her so angrily, and why they look so happy doing it? You would watch your mother try to resist, reaching for you while being beat, screaming at you not to help, in fear of how hard you would be beaten if you did, halting your steps with bloody outstretched palms. Can you imagine the will of a battered black mother screaming and fearing and dying for her child's safety? Do you understand what it is like to witness that kind of love? Your mind would then drift into the people standing beside you, watching her beg. Can you imagine the helplessness of the black men who watch? Strong, educated fathers with accomplishments and advanced degrees, reduced to silhouettes through a target's lens, watching and shaking and imagining their fate if they were to interfere. Someone who could be their wife or sister or mother. Can you fathom the pain and the rage you will feel in not being able to protect or defend a person you love? Can you imagine what that does to the psyche of a powerful yet helpless black man? Would this not cause something in you to boil? Would the bucket in your being not overfill and your rage not overflow? A faint crackle followed by lightheadedness would break your concentration, and the elder would regain your attention. You would see her cheeks widen when she talked about fighting back, when she and the revolution had had enough. There will be hope in her eyes, and you will feel your thoughts climb out of your rage. She would describe the confidence and preparedness she felt in organizing and the strength she felt in locking arms, how for the first time in her life she felt protected, as if by God. She would describe how they marched like people who are protected by God, fearlessly. You would internalize that feeling and it would bring you strength. She would tell you about the gauntlets of enemies they had to march between, the hateful things they would say and heavy stones they would throw. And she would talk about Jesus and how he bared the cross and his responsibility in doing so, and how she found strength in his purpose. Through her testimony, you would hear her pain, and through her eyes, you would see her soul, beaten and weary, yet spiritually energized. You would respect her and feel something similar in yourself, like pride or responsibility to not let her stories be in vain. Then your thoughts would switch, like the changing of a channel, and you would relate her walking through the gauntlet to you walking through the tunnel before playing a college football game against Notre Dame. You would feel the tightness of the space as their band piled on either sides, wearing their tailored uniforms and holding their heavy instruments, taunting and testing you before you walked onto the field. You would remember the endless fans in the stands and the slurs they screamed and the passion in their roars. And you would see them wearing the colors of the home team, your opponent, and their glowing gold helmets and dressed in blue. You would remember how intimidating they looked in their uniforms and how hard they hit in the game, and the referees standing with yellow flags tucked into the clothes with the stripes that referees wear. You would recall how they turned a blind eye to the blatant fouls throughout the game, and remember what it is like for a team to have home field advantage. Then something would click. Your mind would make a connection between supremacy and its uniforms, and the assurances of home field advantage, where everyone played a part in helping you lose, and each of them wore a different uniform. Suddenly the elder would regain your attention, and your heart would sprint when she talked about the dogs they sicked and water they sprayed and gas they threw and mace they maced and sticks they swung and nooses they noosed and guns they shot and charges they dropped, always ending with the words, "But we persisted." This inspiration will calm you, and the stuff inside that boils will become still. Your heartbeat would lull, and you would find strength in her words. You look at your watch and see how fast the time had passed in the day. Kiss her hand goodnight and go home thinking about what you just heard. At night, you will replay the imagery of her words in your mind like film, and this would affect you. Visions of your loved ones being beaten would be stained onto reels and saved in the place where memories are saved. Then you would rest, and sometimes the reels would load and play in your sleep. Can you imagine dreaming of your mother being beaten in your sleep, repeatedly, because of the stories you've heard and because of the images you have seen? Can you imagine if the exaggerations of your subconscious could not over-exaggerate the images of your reality nor the stories of your elders? How would you sleep? Would you too toss and shriek in bed? If you have never dreamt like this, you cannot understand what it is like to be black in America and to dream how we dream. You cannot understand what it is like to wake up to messages and images and videos of another defenseless black person being murdered, triggering the stories of your elders and the nightmares from your sleep, and feeling the stuff that boils begin to bubble like lava until it overflows, and hearing something in you snap like a levee, unable to contain its surge. What do you expect one to do when their levee buckles and they are flooded with burning images of brutality and memories of black people being lynched and beaten and dragged and murdered by people in uniforms who are supposed to protect them? When they're forced to see videos of supremacists in their hoods or their dogs or their guns exercising their supremacy, or videos of police using their arms and knees like nooses, and justice watching it happen and not being served. Do you understand why this produces rage? Yet still we practice peace, and we organize, we lock arms and march through the gauntlet of the team wearing the uniform that triggers our trauma, hoping they surprise us and help to change our perceptions so that someday the meaning of their uniform can mean protection for all. But instead they slaughter us and treat us like property. Do you not understand why this produces rage? If every time you heard news of a person being helplessly murdered and your mind forced you to imagine the face of someone you loved like your mother, could you understand why one would be inspired to show you a glimpse of the pain and the inferno they feel inside? How else can we make you see how killing our people affects us so that you can fathom our pain? What do you expect from a people who have been raped, hanged, stripped, beaten, hosed, humiliated, sick, dragged, and murdered in the name of white supremacy behind the disguise and the protection of uniforms? Do you understand why this produces rage? And yet we persist, charged with the resilience of our ancestors and fueled by the disassociation to the objects on the land being destroyed. These are the images you see in the news and in your streets. The looting, the inferno, and the rage. This is the image of Black American pain on display for the world to see. The way our streets look is how we feel inside, because the cries of our ancestors still fall on deaf ears. Our people are dying, and no one is protecting us. So we march without fear, as if protected by God. We organize with our feet and with our voices and with our minds, and if need be, by any means necessary. Because that is how we persist. That is the only way change is made. This is the charge of our elders in the spirit of the revolution. And finally, it is being televised.